Hi guys, and welcome to another film review. Today I'll be looking at the absolutely beautiful and Oscar shortlisted Vermiglio, which is Italy's official submission for the Oscar for Best International Feature Film. Vermiglio is going to be released in UK cinemas in early January. The film is set towards the end of World War II in a tiny little village in the Italian Alps, where there is this head teacher who is almost like the patriarch of the village. This patriarch has a great sense of social justice by offering reading classes for adults in his spare time, but he also reinforces class divides and their hierarchy. However, this is not some film about the patriarchy or gender inequality. This film is much more pivoted towards the lives of different generations of women in the village. We see their different point of views, their roles as mothers, sisters, and daughters, and how they differ between generations. At the start of the film, we see Pietro, played by Giuseppe Di Domenico, who is from Sicily and has abandoned the battlefield of the World War and seeks refuge where he can live in peace. He falls in love with the oldest daughter of the family, Lucia, played by Martina Shrinzi. As the conflict ends and society has to move on from the conflict, we see how it has really impacted on these different women, as well as their relationships with their family members and partners, as they slightly spiral out of control, showing the really devastating effects of warfare. In this video, I'm going to review the film, give my thoughts of how well it tells its story, its character, and utilising that beautiful landscape. I will then follow it up by looking at how well it could do in the Oscar race, now that it's been confirmed as the final 15 for Best International Feature Film. So let's roll and review that film. If you're new to my channel, my name is Paul, and I review the best of world cinema, and I follow the race for Best International Feature Film Academy Award, from the process of countries selecting their submissions to the final winner. Vermiglio is a stunning piece of cinematography, fully utilising that Italian Alps backdrop. The narrative is driven by the seasonal arrangements within the Alps, from blistering hot summers to freezing cold winters, where snow covers the Alps. It is really an effective way of storytelling and portraying the moods, thoughts, and feelings of each character. And the way the camera captures the seasons is a really beautiful way of showing that cinematic language that we all adore. The film is a bit like a family lexicon, sort of occasionally focusing on different women at different points and then reverting back to their own narratives every now and then, which provides it a really interesting, almost textual feel to the narrative. While I admire and appreciate this approach, I also feel it's a little bit unfocused and it doesn't necessarily fully flesh out some of these characters' narratives as it could. So one example of this is this younger sister who's a closet lesbian, who is drenched with Catholic guilt, but also seems to enjoy her father's magazines with pictures of naked women in. We don't really get to see her story beyond that. It feels a bit rushed and unfocused. But I suppose there was a directorial decision to focus on particular characters and spend less time on other characters. So for time's sake, I can fully understand that. And I think the approach really captures the impact war had on generations of women at that time. It's not just about the male-dominated battlefields where people dying and shooting each other. There was this whole psychological and societal impact on everyone, whether they were on the battlefield or waiting at home or had to continue living their lives, not knowing if their loved ones were still alive. This approach to narrative telling really captures what it's like to address what communities were thinking at the time and how when you remove an element of community to go off and fight, how that upsets the balance of different family relationships. I think there's something about how this may contribute to the idea that Western societies have slightly abandoned the concept of community, or it's certainly a lesser factor. We're much more mobile in terms of where we live. We make our own choices where we think of perhaps ourselves first rather than for the family or the wider community. And this transition from community to individualization, whether there's good or bad points about both, I think the film really captures that period and creates this understanding of how that transition started to happen. The director of this film, Maura De Pello, is from a documentary making background, and he really understands how she's utilised those skills. She really documents each action. There's lots of focus on the banal, the everyday, the washing of clothes, the making of food, just watching sheep, whatever it might be. She documents those actions, but also the thoughts and feelings and anything else that is happening in the community. And I think this approach really elevates the film from being a very typical and conventional way of telling World War stories, which often feel quite familiar and predictable, despite the fact they obviously have a lot of worthiness because it was a difficult time. I think one element that really surprised me is it's not overly political, it's not overly cynical, it's not a critique and saying how bad things are. It's more observational, and it really enables the viewer to sit there and think and ruminate how they feel about some of these issues. And it's not necessarily a black and white situation. This could have been a film that was very problematic and saying something's either good or really bad. But it doesn't do that. It shows that elements of grey and enables the viewer to ruminate in those elements of grey. I would give Vermiglio 4 stars, and I would rank it as my 8th favourite from the 21 Oscar submissions for Best International Feature Film I have seen so far. And for me, it firmly deserves to sit in that final 15 shortlisting.
1, 2, 3.
Quei che tornano alla guerra, i casi segreti. E se non torna in tempo il battesimo?
Forse gli è capitato per gozzo.
Quando Nana sposa, adesso chi è che l'ha il suo stappo?
Ai, Lucia!
So let's have a look at how well it could do in the Oscar race. The film has had a number of award successes, including winning the Silver Bear at the Venice Film Festival, and has been submitted for the Academy Award for Best International Feature Film by Italy, and has made the final 15 shortlist. I'm going to do a separate video on this, but to me, Vermiglio is in the sort of middle element with a chance of making that final 5 nominations. You've got films such as Emilia Perez by France, The Secret of the Sacred Fig by Germany, and I'm Still Here by Brazil, which are pretty certain to be shoo-ins for a nomination. And then you've got 2 more nominations, which I think Vermiglio for Italy is in the running, along with the likes of Kneecap for Ireland, Fly for Latvia, Dahomey for Senegal, and maybe a couple of others. It has a chance to make that final 5. However, I don't think it's a certainty. So let's have a quick look at Italy at the Oscars to provide some context for Vermiglio going into this round of the competition. In the category of Best International Feature Film Oscar, Italy actually have the most Oscar wins out of any nation, 14, 2 ahead of France. They also have 19 nominations and 1 shortlisting film. With Vermiglio making the final 15 shortlist, they're going to add to those numbers, regardless at whatever stage they get to. Not including the most recent shortlisting, the last 10 years has seen Italy, in most recent history, be ranked 13th, with only 2 films being put forward for the nomination stage. These are The Hand of God and Io Capitano. With Vermiglio making the final 15 shortlist, they're going to add to those numbers. And perhaps what's most interesting is the fact those 2 nominations and at least a shortlisting has happened 3 years out of the last 4 years. There was just a bit of a gap between the last Italian win, The Great Beauty, and getting an Oscar nomination, which suggests while over the 10-year period, they haven't had as much success as you would expect. In the more recent 4-year period, they're doing extremely well, and they're one of the heavy hitters again in this category. The big question is, can Vermiglio make that final 5 nomination? There's so many European films in contention of getting that, they could crowd each other out just because there will be a push to not be overly heavily Europeanized in the nominations. They would need at least 1 or 2 films that aren't European, which could be against Italy's favour. Although we've had in recent years 4 out of the 5 nominations coming from Europe, so you just never know. If you like this video, please do like it, and do put in a comment if you've seen the film, and let me know what you think. And if you want to see how well it's going to do at the Oscars and follow more news on the Best International Feature Film Academy Award, please do subscribe to Global Film Pool and look out for more content and reviews on this Oscar category.